Yeah, you and the rest of the party are in the forest at the base of the mountains. Go ahead and make me a perception check. Okay. Yeah, you do see one creature off in the tree line a little bit. It's small. Looks like it's skulking around looking for something. It has red scales, a tail. It doesn't notice you. Yes, you recognize it as a kobold. That's a pretty classic introduction, right? Especially for this tiny little cannon fodder monster. But does it have to be? Today we're going to take a look at kobolds and see that they can actually be pretty dangerous for your players. Good old kobolds. They were one of the first monsters introduced to D&D in 1974, and they're based off of these little cave-dwelling, mine-living creatures from German folklore. And at first glance, they're not very impressive. They have negatives to almost all of their stats, and they're considered pretty weak in Dungeons & Dragons, and it's comparable in systems like Pathfinder and the monster manuals put out by companies like Kobold Press. Their numbers might not look really good, but it's using them in numbers that can make them really dangerous and a problem for your players. So let's take a look at some ways to effectively use these iconic creatures. It's important to remember that kobolds are clever and that they're pack hunters. They're ambush predators. They can work together, they can use tools, they can set traps, and they're not really stupid. They can be pretty clever, and they know how to use their overwhelming numbers to their advantage. In the description of their society in a lot of the books, it talks about the fact that they lay large numbers of eggs, that they're sort of swarm fighters that try to overwhelm everyone else. They can use traps, and especially important to note, they're smart enough to know when to run away. Specifically in 5th edition, take a look at the pack tactics skill. All kobolds have this, and it gives them advantage on all of their attacks as long as another kobold is conscious and within 5 feet of their enemy. When you put that with the fact that they realize that they're smaller and maybe not as strong, you should always have multiple kobolds surrounding your players, trying to overwhelm them with their numbers. The thing to remember is that kobolds aren't inherently stupid. Yes, I know, they only have an intelligence of 8, but think about it this way. Wargs and direwolves and displacer beasts and regular wolves, they all have lower intelligence scores than your standard kobold, but we tend to think of them as being smart and savvy pack hunters, just like the kobolds are. And on top of that, kobolds are smart enough that they use tools. They have and make their own weapons. They have speech. They know how to lay traps and how to be an ambush predator. On top of that, some of them can cast spells and some of them can even fly. One of the setups that I like to use for players is play into the fact that most players and maybe their characters think of kobolds as pushovers. I'll have just one little kobold off by herself, and when they start to go and chase after her, she'll run, leading them right into a trap. Kobolds are smart enough to use cliff edges, push rocks over, maybe dig a couple of pitfall traps. All of a sudden, the party is in way over their head because they didn't take the threat seriously. Plus, as a small creature, kobolds have the ability to move pretty quickly and duck under things or crawl into small holes and caves that your larger, medium-sized player characters probably can't chase them through. There's also a lot of different types of kobolds at your disposal, so I want to look at some of the really fun ones. Winged kobolds are great. They add another layer of trying to get away from your players. They can fly, and they usually have a pack of stones and rocks that they can throw at the players to cause damage, as well as their daggers, so that's a pretty hefty threat. And if you pick up Volo's Guide, you also have the kobold dragon shields, the inventors, and the sorcerers. Dragon shields are the champions of the kobolds. They are able to wear armor, they have pluses to all of their physical stats, so they are stronger, plus they can give advantages as well as some bonuses to saving throws. So they're a really good sort of commander for your Kobold forces. The inventors are one of my favorite Kobolds. Dawn has used them against us in one of her campaigns. They're really clever. They know how to make traps and make stuff. It's likely that you'll find them with poison or acid on them. Plus, they also like to throw their gadgets and use their inventions against the party players. They may have something on them like a box full of centipedes that they throw and it breaks open, and all of a sudden this is something else that is stinging and biting the players, plus giving them difficult terrain to maneuver through. Or they have scorpions tied to the ends of sticks and they use that as an additional weapon. There's a lot of really cool flavor that a Kobold inventor introduces, plus we have this really smart sort of extra fun monster at hand. The Kobold sorcerers are pretty great too. They're at least a level 3 caster, and they can output some pretty good damage. They've got Burning Hands, Scorching Ray, and Chromatic Orb at a minimum, plus a number of other really good support spells and some attack spells. Those are the ones that you're going to find in your D&D books, but there's other resources out there. If you want to bring Kobold Press's book into things, and if I'm going to do an episode about kobolds, of course I am going to use the Kobold Press, then we've got some really fun options. And their big heavy hitter is the Kobold Chieftain. First of all, the Kobold Chieftain really is the leader of his people. He can give inspiration to all of the other Kobolds. He has a great reaction where he can throw the spikes that are on the side of his shield out at anyone else that just attacked him. And he can throw those at those that are in melee as well as ranged attacks. And he gets 2 attacks. He's carrying a short sword and gets 2 attacks every round. He can put out a decent amount of damage. Like I said, kobolds can be pretty dangerous as long as you kind of have an understanding for how to use them. I think that they're great. I think that they're a lot of fun. They're small and they're quick. They're good at hiding and trying to escape. They can dig traps. They can wait for ambushes. They can talk to each other. They can fly and cast spells, as well as they are really adept at pack hunting tactics. So take a look at the Kobold again. Maybe throw half a dozen or 10 or 15 at your party. Use a few of the different types, and quickly your party's going to find out that these laughable little creatures might be more than they can handle. But what do you think about kobolds? How have you used them? Are there some clever kobold societies that you've introduced into some of your campaigns? Let me know in the comments below, and I look forward to reading those. I want to say a big thank you to all of our patrons on Patreon, especially to Arvi and Will, Sean, and Lainey. If you'd like to hop over and take a look at our Patreon and maybe join us on our campaign, that would be really cool of you. I want to say thank you to everybody that watches and likes and comments, and especially if you share. Find your favorite video and post it someplace. It's really awesome when you all do that. So I'm Ryan, and this is Roll for Initiative, and I'll see you on the next Monster Mash.